Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host Mike Fisher, and today I'm doing a special drawing demo on my Wacom Cintiq. And an upcoming episode will feature John Spanky Stokes of SpankyStokes.com, which is a website that reports on the custom vinyl toy industry. Companies like Kid Robot and their releases and other big toy, those of the collector toy companies, and John's kind of the one of the big dogs in that, but he has his own figure that is called a Stroll, which is like a troll with an S on the front from his name Spanky, so it's a Stroll. It's a really cool vinyl figure. I love the thing. So one of the things that he's done is he has created this he does these collaborations where he'll send to artists a flat image of the bust of the character, and then half of it's empty, and then an artist will draw their own version on the other half. So it's like this little collaboration. They're really, really cool. If you follow him on Instagram, it's Spanky Stokes. You can see a ton of these. He posts them all over. So he sent me the template, and I am going to spend some time drawing here today, and you guys can get an idea of how I work. I wanted people to see how I work in regards to, like, if I was doing this as a t-shirt, I'm gonna set it up kind of as a t-shirt design, how I work with my layers, and it's kind of my whole process, so people can see how I do what I do. I did some of these drawing videos last year when I was trying to get this podcast going, and they were wildly popular. So I see them on YouTube all the time, and people seem to really like seeing how different artists work, because we all do things a little bit different, even if we do them kind of the same. And as always, the unofficial sponsor of the show is Topo Chico, and they are the unofficial sponsor, but the official beverage of Anyway Whatever podcast. I always like to give them shout outs because it's my favorite drink, and in my house, I always have it in my house. So if you see the goofy glove, that is on my hand to help it slide on the surface of my drawing tablet. I'll throw a picture of my drawing tablet so you can see what it is I'm working on. And then I'm just going to go through I have the file basically set up just to save time so you guys don't have to watch me do all this dumb busy work. But I'm just going to dive in here and get to it, and I'll chat with you as I go. And yeah, let's do it. Oh, I need my keyboard. So basically what I have here is I have my file set up. I have some groups. I have a color group that will have layers, which each color that I do in it. I have a BG group, which is like the background, all the stuff that's going to be behind the character to fill out the image. And one of the things I do right up front is I always have a layer, my layer that has my drawing on it. The actual line art is named the same as the brush that I used for it, because I have thousands of Photoshop brushes, and if I don't make note of which one I used, if I need to come back and start working on this drawing again tomorrow, I'll never remember. So a little tip, name the layer with the brush you use to create that. Today I'm going to be using brushes from True Grit Supply. I mean, it's like, I think it's truegrit.com. They create brushes and effects for Adobe Photoshop, and they have a lot of really cool stuff. And I'm not being paid to say that. I'm not sponsored by True Grit. I use several different companies' tools in Photoshop, brushes and tools. But for what I'm doing here, I really want to use something that's got a little bit of grit to it. So the brushes I'm using, the set that I'm using, is going to be from the from the Rusty Nib set, and I'm going to be using the classic brush liner. And it is in brush nibs. And no. Trying to find it. There it is, brush liner, and it's got a nice, cool little grain to it. It's super cool. If you can hear my dog's kind of trapped in here. He comes in to visit me, and then sometimes he's getting old, so he can't get back out. So if you hear him trip-trapping around back there, that's what that is. So I'm using the classic brush liner. One of the things I haven't talked about too much yet on the show is that I am an officially licensed Ratfink artist through the Ed Roth family. They control the name, and then they give different artists license to create art out of Ed Roth's pantheon of art, and then you give them a cut of whatever it is that you sell through the year. I just got licensed this year, so I haven't really been able to create anything yet, but if people know my art, I know a lot of it is influenced heavily by Ed Roth and the Ratfink character. If you're not familiar with that, who that is and what that is, go ahead and Google it. So I'm going to do my version of the Stroll as kind of in a Ratfink style. So I'm just going to kind of get to it. One of the things I like to do up in the beginning is I like to do my basic heavy detail or heavy base lines pretty dark. I like to have a little darker outline to things, and then the detail uses a slightly thinner weight brush. So I'm going to do all my outline, basic big areas, and then I will come back in and start detailing stuff out. So let's just start right here with the eye, just to get the focal point. To get the focal point going. And I work the way I work. There's probably ways that are way faster and way easier than what I do. Right now what I'm doing is I'm setting the smoothing on my brush to 10. I always like to keep it at 10 because the smoothing helps keep the jitter in your line down. The higher the value, the more control Photoshop takes over your stroke. I don't like it to have full control, so I just keep it at 10 just to help keep a little more smoothness to my line. I find that works pretty well for me. So one of the things about Ratfink is it was created as kind of a nemesis to Disney and Mickey Mouse in the 1950s when Ed Roth was growing up and becoming an artist. He didn't particularly care for the squeaky clean nature of Mickey Mouse, and so he wanted to create a character that was like the opposite of Mickey, and so he came up with Ratfink. So the thing about Ratfink is, if Mickey Mouse is the squeaky clean American character, he wanted Ratfink to be super gross, and so everything about making one of these Fink characters is to make it as gross as you possibly can. So that's always the goal here with the Fink characters, is just to make them gross as you can. These are little pieces of hair, and I'm trying to tie in one side to the other. I feel like that, you want it to feel like. And I'm probably gonna make this guy look a little bit melty, not totally melty, but a little bit melty. So one of the things I'm gonna definitely do is I want to give this like a little cup that the horn is gonna be sitting in. So we've got to kind of give that a little bit of. And so this horn on this side, it's got these scallops. So I'm going to get these scallops in here. I'm going to actually do like a full divider. And I'm going to make it a little bit, I'm going to give it a little bit of my own flavor. That brush is a little bit thick. There we go. And then I'll come back in, and this is just for me to get my basic line art down. You'll see how I work. Like, I really go back and forth a lot. I draw, I erase, I draw, I erase. So I just want to kind of get my basic areas out, and so I can start focusing on where things are and, you know, how I'm going to lay the whole thing out. And again, like I said, I'm going to go in and I'll go back and heavily edit everything as I go. He's got a little chin here. I'm going to put a little bit of stuff in there. I'm not going to do too much here with the upper body. I'm going to use it to pull some stuff down off of the face. So yep, here we go. We're getting the basics are pretty much there. I mean, that's pretty much the dude, right? And so what I'll do now is I'll go in and I'll start adding grossness to it. You know what I mean? Like I said, the entire goal is to make these guys as gross as you possibly can get it. Here's a little outline file. Now that I'm done with that, you can see it. There's a little outline that comes with the template. Now that I have my line art on there, I'll turn that off so it's not bugging me from below. So one of the things that Finks have is they usually have a bunch of warts, and a lot of times they're actually hairy warts, which is extremely disgusting, I understand, but that is, again, the point. So I'm going to go in and start putting some gross warts in here. I know I told John I was going to do this, and he got pretty excited. So I hope he really likes what I've done with his character, and he's going to be on. Like I said, he's going to be on the show, and he was a really cool dude to sit and talk to. He's such a nice guy. I really like Spanky a lot, and I hope he comes back on over and over again. One thing I forgot here is I need to add a tongue. Every good Fink has a giant, gross tongue. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to delete out some of this stuff so I can make room to add a gross tongue to this dude. But I still need to remember that the tooth's got to be there. So let us... Got his tooth in of a brush. Let us add this big wagging tongue. There we go. Now we're talking. And then, of course, because that sits in front, we'll just get rid of this line. There we go. There we go. Now we can put the tooth back in. One of the things about the Fink teeth is they seem to have these groove lines in them so that they have a little texture. And if you are familiar with my art at all, I add these little groove lines to like every drawing I do practically. It's like one of those things that's so heavily influenced by Ed Roth's work that since we're going back 40 years, 45 years, since I was a really, really little 5 or 6 year old kid. And so, you know, a lot of his signature things wind up just as part of my personal style. It's like an inspiration to me. I remember one of my first memories as a person is my dad was a hot rod guy, and we would go to car shows and car rallies and races and drag races and every other possible car related activity in the early 70s when I was just a little dude. And so one of my first memories was walking into the Cow Palace in San Francisco at a car show, and there was a giant like Fink, fiberglass Fink, like popping out of the roof of this hot rod, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I hadn't seen much because I was pretty little, but it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And yes, Fink characters will almost always have warts on their tongue. So I'm going to add a couple of weird warts and texture and stuff like that to the tongue, just to make it as gross as I can. Like I said, that's always the point, is to be as gross as humanly possible when doing one of these kind of characters. The lip is basically like a tube, right? So anything you can do to accentuate the fact that that's a round surface, tubular surface, is going to help a lot with creating that form, because you're trying to use lines to make people see a shape, and then you're going to, later on, we're going to go in and we're going to add color and shading to further make people see that what the shapes, to pull the shapes out. This right here, this section, it's a little flat for me, since we're talking about using form to create shape. If I come in and I make this area actually have some curvature, it starts to it starts telling your eye that this horn is actually round. It has some shape to it. So, and if we do that, then it looks like it's wrapping around back behind, which is what we want it to look like. This horn is sitting like in a cup inside of this character's head, right? So now we can just go back and add a little bit of grossness to it. And now I think you can see where I was going with it. It is starting to come together now. There we go. There we go. And then I can further sell that shape by adding some things like that. So that's going to further sell what I'm trying to sell. And this is going to have these little scallops, and that is like supposed to be, I guess, kind of like a little goat horn. I'm going to add a little bit of extra juice to it, so it gets a cool little ridge right there. So now we're starting to get somewhere. Like I was saying, one of my favorite sayings about art comes from the chef, the cooking show chef, Alton Brown. His show, Good Eats, is probably my favorite cooking show, and it might be one of my favorite TV shows ever. I've learned a lot of stuff about a lot of different things that don't really involve cooking. And one of them is, and I've applied it to my art, is that he says, never miss an opportunity to add flavor. And so I look at my drawings in the same way, and I try to add as much flavor to my drawings as I can. So that's a good lesson, that you can find artistic inspiration or just inspiration about how to do things from all sorts of different places. Even cooking show can teach you something about creative life. Imagine that. So I kind of want to have this guy be a little bit like, one of the things about Fink characters is that they're supposed to be kind of like sweaty and jittery. And so any chance you have to add shaky lines or gross, drippy things, and just anything that visually kind of gross, that's going to be your cue to do so. Okay, so just continually going over and over and over areas to get the shapes that I want and to start filling out. I really want to make sure that this dude has like a little bit of an eye socket. When you're looking at like monsters, one of the quickest ways to make people feel uncomfortable is to give your monster sunken eyes, because it's like a death mask. And if you are at all familiar with the psychology of making people afraid through visuals, you put a mask on somebody and you're halfway there. And so yeah, it's the zombie, it's the sunken zombie eyes. It's got, it's the skull, overall skull look. One of the things that's important about these Sphinx and the tongue and stuff is they're usually slobbering. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm going to add some slobber to this tongue because it's super gross. And I will come in and I will go over. I'll go over some of these areas and then come back in and get some of these lines out. So we're trying to create some overlapping depth there. And like I was saying before, I work in a really specific way, and I'm sure it's pretty common. Most, I don't think I'm, doing anything particularly new, but I do things the way I do them. And if you're watching this and there's some way I'm doing this that you find interesting or you find completely ridiculous, please feel free to comment below and tell me how you do it. But I am a firm believer in the world of art. There is no right or wrong way to do anything. However you do it is the way to do it. But if there's a better, smarter way, I'm always open to learning new stuff. So now we got this guy slobbering good. He's kind of got these weird melting parts. I'm going to continue on with that melting, with the melting look. And I may actually, normally I would do this guy in like a green color as an homage to Ratfink, because Ratfink is he's usually colored in green. He's pretty much always colored in green. His brother Ratfink is blue. So what I think I'm going to do with this is, because this guy's kind of a Yeti, I'm going to go ahead and probably do him in like an icy blue to stick a little bit with Spanky's rendition that we have here. But so yeah, I'm just continually adding detail to these things as I go. I think he needs a wart on his chin. Like that. And yeah, we're pretty close to getting the actual drawing part done here. Pretty close. And he's going to get bloodshot eyes and all that stuff. I just really want to make sure that you guys see the basics of how I do my job. So I think that is pretty close to what I want at this point. I'll go, as I color, I'll probably go back in and add some more things to it. I work forward and back and forward and back and forward and back quite a lot, and so you'll see how I do that. I'm not 100% happy with how this horn area is, so I might mess with that a little bit here real quick. It's not selling the way I want it to sell. But that's a little bit better. That's a little bit better. Just clean it up a little bit here. I kind of did it on the fly. So let's give this like a little lip. And that's a lot better. I feel that's a lot better. Okay, cool. Now we can kind of start going on to the coloring aspect. Like I said, I already have, basically, I keep all of my colors in a separate group so I can expand or contract it depending on what. It just keeps things clean, and I'm a huge proponent of labeling every layer with a specific name. So if anybody ever has to open this file, they won't be completely lost. I'll have a guide. As a professional designer and illustrator, it's important to know that people are going to open this file that aren't you. And you don't want them to be totally lost. You want them to have as big a guide as you possibly can. I'm going to rename this green to blue high. And my highlight layers, I always do things like the blue, the highlight color I call color name high. The shading color I usually call dark color name. In this case, it'd be dark blue. And then the main will be blue. And I'll pick like an icy blue. And then, so I have a blue layer here that I probably won't need. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Then I have color, you know, tan, dark tan, yellow, you know, something for the teeth, something for the tongue, some reds, stuff like that. So I basically have this dude ready to go. I thought I had him flatted. I do not. So one of the things you're going to have to do in order to set this off, I have this white background layer. I'm going to turn that gray because I need to add a white base underneath this, because if it was getting printed on t-shirts, for dark shirts, it has to have a white base that all the other colors will print on top of. So I always end up doing it that way. There's a very quick way to do it. But I'm going to do it kind of the long way, where I'm just going to go in and I'm going to select this in a general sense. I'm going to go in and I'm going to fill that with white. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to, when I'm doing any of my coloring, I usually just use a regular brush. I don't use one of the sketchy, you know, true grit brushes. I'm just going to use a regular brush, and then I'll just come in here with and I'll just go in and fill in these areas by hand. I know that this is not the smartest way to do it, but a lot of times this is how I work. And one of the reasons I do it this way is it allows me to look over the drawing on a finer level while I work, so that if there's something that I missed or don't like, I'm staring directly at it. And I'm going to go over a little bit of technique on how I color things as well. That is an eraser. There we go. So now I have this white base. And one of the things I could do, and I might do, is I can select that and I can go up to the blue layer, my regular blue, and I can find the color I want for this dude. And I think I want him to be kind of this icy blue. So I'll fill him completely in. I'll fill him in like that. So now I can just go in and I can erase out these areas that need to be white, such as the teeth and the tongue, because the tongue's going to need to be red. So I'll just select out all this, delete that. Same thing with the horn. And I can go in and fine tune. Again, probably a better way to do this. So there we go. Now I have my basically colored character. Like, we're good to go on starting to add color detail to this. I'm gonna take a quick break, and then I will come back and we'll get started again on the actual coloring. Okay, I'm back from my little break. I'm gonna start coloring this thing now. I got a nice base blue. I'm gonna start laying in shadows. I always do my shadow color next, and it's not gonna be too dramatically dark because I want this guy to kind of stay a little bit vibrant. One of the things about the Ed Roth characters is that they almost always use really vibrant. Let me shut off my back monitor. Really vibrant fluorescent colors. That's kind of part of the entire look of these things. So I'm just gonna go in and again, you know, I think I am gonna use one of the True Grit brushes. I'm just gonna go back with that same liner brush, just to give it a little bit extra funk to it. Again, any chance to add flavor, right? Isn't that what I told you? So I'm gonna sink in this eye socket a little bit, like I was saying before, because that always adds a little bit of a scariness to it. And if you are watching this and you're familiar with skateboard culture, you will also notice that there is a heavy influence from Santa Cruz skateboards from the 80s. That was another big influence of mine. Jim Phillips ran the art studio at Santa Cruz Skateboards in the 80s. I think he still does now. And his son Jimbo, I know him from the art scene. And Jimbo and Jim Phillips are really, really cool guys. I actually interviewed at Phillips Studios back in the 80s, but my commute wasn't going to really work out. And so, yeah, heavy influence from the Phillips people. One of the things about doing shirt designs is that every color that gets printed, it costs money and increases the price per shirt. So you always want to try to keep, the struggle is to get something that looks as cool as you can, while at the same time, keeping your client from going broke with a shirt with 10 colors. So you got to try to find ways to add color without add detail without adding too much color. It's an internal struggle for anybody who designs t-shirts. Trust me on that one for sure. So working on this area with the with the lip, like I was saying, it's like a tubular shape. So one of the things we're going to want to try to do is push the center section forward with light color and push the bottom and the top back so that it gets a rounded feel to it. So we'll work towards that goal by shading. So, I mean, you can already start to see what I'm trying to do there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the drool. Normally the drool would be a blue color, but because I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, I just want to real quick, I'm sorry. I'm just going to pop up this thing to make sure. Okay, good. Wanted to make sure that I was recording the audio. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I may do the spit green just to make it extra gross. But we'll see. We'll get that in there at a later time. One of the other things we're going to need to do is we're going to need to put a drop shadow on that lip, and then also on the tongue, because it's going to be creating a shadow. And everything we do is to try to add shading and color to trick people into seeing the shape we want them to see. That's the goal at all times, is to try to fool the eye into seeing something as three-dimensional, even though it is actually two-dimensional. And I am not good at it. It's the thing I have never been very good at, and I wonder if my style developed because of that limitation. I worked for an artist named James Ryman. Shout out James Ryman. For many years in the video game industry, and he was like my mentor. And he was one of those people who could look at any single room and tell you exactly where all the light sources were coming from. And he taught me more about that than anybody ever. And even with that, even with an expert, yeah, I still struggle with it. So I think my art is kind of a little bit influenced by my lack of ability, for lack of a better way to put it. So I do my best, and I draw from all of my influences, like the Phillips, the people at Phillips Studios, Jim and Jimbo, like Ed Roth and Robert Williams, and all of the guys who worked for him over the years. So I think I'm obviously okay at it because people pay me to do it, and if I wasn't any good, nobody would pay me to do it. So I'm getting pretty close on my shading here with this icy blue, and yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. I'm gonna add a little bit of shading down in the body. we're going to add some shape down here, some shadow to let people know that these things are dropping a shadow. One of the things in regards to my my limitations in understanding lighting is I tend to put all my lighting, you know, for a character like this, it's always going to be coming straight down from the top center, like as if it's like the sun, or like, you know, it's some kind of studio light or something like that. If you look at my drawings, you'll see my light source is always like one of two places. It's either coming straight down or it's coming down from one side at like a 3/4 angle. You know, like I said, limitations. So I'm getting pretty close here. I may come back and add a little more detail to the in the line art to to the body of this guy, but I think I'm going to come back in right now and add some lighter tones of this blue. So one of the things in Photoshop, if you're not aware, most people are, is if you have the brush tool selected and you hit the Alt key, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's Control. I think it's the Apple key on Macintosh. If you hit Alt, it changes to a crosshair, and that is the color selector tool. So then I just sample the lighter color, that mid-range blue, and I'll come in and I'll find like a little lighter version of it. And then I can come in and start adding my higher highlights in this, that is the wrong layer, in this layer I called blue high. And I'm going to make a little bit smaller brush. So, and one of the nice things is you can always come back later, because Photoshop is so great, you can come back later and change the colors super easily. So I want this to be a little bit lighter. And you, at the end of this, if I wanted to make this guy all green, I could just go in and change all of these colors out. But I think for the sake of this, I'm not going to. I like that he's kind of a blue abominable snowman looking dude. So again, what we're trying to do here is we are trying to create depth with color. So the illusion of shape by using shades of color. So, you know, if I'm trying to convince you that this is like a tubular shape, I'm going to do so by adding highlights in the middle. And then the core shadow will help sell the shape, so to speak. So I'm just going to keep working out these little areas to kind of show the shapes I'm trying to make. And the color, I'm going to go in real quick and I'm going to erase out the spit areas so that I don't shade them. Let's make this a spit. So, I mean, I kind of wanted him to look melty, and I think he does, but yeah, so I think that looks much better. And then I'll go back to my blue high layer, and I'll just keep coming in and adding highlights to this guy. One of the things I'll do at the very, very end is I'll come in with like just a pure white and create specular areas on this thing so that it looks really shiny. Because like I said, with the Fink characters, one of the things you're always trying to do is make things look gross. And these guys should look like sweaty and greasy and disgusting as humanly possible, or inhumanly possible, I should say. So adding these specular areas helps. And in this case, it actually helps sell the fact that he's maybe a little bit wet and melted. So, and you know, you want to show where the light's hitting things as well, where your light source is hitting things. So that's kind of the basic. I'll keep going back and forth. I'll work back and forth. I'll go in, do this, go out, do that. So I'm going to go to the tongue color. I have this red. There's going to be a dark red that's going to go over the top of it. So I'm just going to grab a nice bright color red, nice and bright, and paint this tongue in red. Again, I could probably select all this and then fill it in, but I like to, like I said, I like to inspect my line art as I'm doing this. One of the things I learned when I was young and I was drawing with pens, and I'd have to fill big areas of black with an ink pen, is that if I used circular motions and drew small circles like I am right now, if you can see, it allows me to get into tighter spaces. And if I'm going up and down, I want to know if anybody else uses this circular technique, because I've never talked to anybody who has, and I know other people do use it, because I can't have possibly been the only person who realizes that's a good way to do it. So I'm going to go back out and get this red out of my spit. And I'll come back and reshape that a little bit. Same thing over here, because we want this to look like it's runny spit, and it can't be red. Let's refine that a little bit, and then we'll come back with some other color to get the spit how we want it. So there's the tongue. I'm gonna put some yellow on the teeth. That is where I'm gonna go next. I have this yellow layer, and I'm gonna pick a nice gross yellow color. I want something a little closer to, there we go. Everybody knows a good monster has yellow teeth because he does not ever brush them. And any good fink would stay away from a toothbrush and a dentist for as long as humanly possible. Because they're more interested in hot rods and other stuff. So now, as you can see, we're starting to get more color going in here. I'm going to need to come back and add some shadow around this tooth to make it pop a little bit. But let's get some more of this flat color stuck in there right now. We need to get a tan color. Let me go a little more towards orange. So this is going to be our basic horn color. Again, the little small circles when I'm getting close to the edges. When I'm doing these scallops, I'm gonna, instead of coming back and putting white in, I'm just gonna leave white there to tell the story. I may actually make this horn a slightly darker towards brown, like that, and then I'll add this tan. And since this scallop has a little edge on the top, I want to keep some white there so that you can see it has a ridge. And this goes back to what I've been saying the entire time, is that I did all of that on the wrong layer. Welcome to my life. If I just select it and then come back over to my tan and fill it with the color I want, and then I can come back over here to the yellow layer and just delete it off of there. Save yourself a whole bunch of time. So this darker tan, I'm going to go back and redo that. Something probably in that range. And then I'll knock all this out when I'm doing my color separations, because you don't want to have a color print over the top of another color if that color isn't white. So let's get these scallops finished. We're just going to add a shadow line from that all the way up there. That is our basic colors. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. I don't like that yellow. I don't like it. It's not quite bright enough. There we go. So if I select that, I can fill it with the color I want on the yellow layer. And I'm also going to add some of that to the eye, because everybody knows a yellow eye creature is the most terrifying of them all. And I'm also going to come back in and I'm going to add bloodshot veins to this to this eyeball. So yeah, we're getting there. We're starting to get there. Let's go and do those veins right now. So when I'm doing veins, I usually use two reds. I use a dark red as kind of a shadow, and then I put the brighter red over the top. And what that does is that gives me a cool dimensional look. So I'm going to sample my red. I'm going to go to my red layer, my dark red layer, and I'm going to pick a little bit darker red. Not a lot darker, just a little bit. And I'm going to come in here, get a very small brush, and I'm going to lay in these bloodshot areas. And if you want to know what the Ratfink character really brought to the world of art, it's bloodshot eyes. Anytime you've ever seen a bloodshot eyes on a cartoon character who was supposed to be a monster, that's probably where it came from. So I'll just throw all these bloodshot veins in here. And then what I'll do is I'll go to my red layer, which is over the top. And I will then come back in with my brighter red, and I'll draw those back in slightly offset like that, so that they have a little drop shadow and just adds a little bit of depth. Maybe use a tiny smaller brush, and all you have to do is just go right up next to the line, the darker red line. And one of the things about using one of these drawing tablets, if you're not aware, is they're pressure sensitive. So the harder I push, the thicker the line weight, and the lighter I touch, the thinner the line weight. So I can vary my line weight by how much pressure I put on. So I'm constantly pushing and lightening my touch to the drawing tablet as I draw to help get cool line weights. And so you get the thick to thin line is, used to be you had to do it with a brush dipped in ink, and it's a lot like pinstriping, and it is a very, very difficult skill to master. So I'm kind of glad I learned how to do it the analog way, because it helps a lot with this digital stuff, because I really don't draw on paper at all anymore. Everything I do is digital pretty much now, especially now that I've gotten this Wacom Cintiq. On an episode of the podcast, if you've listened, me and artist Karen Hazmat have a good long discussion about the realities of using a Wacom tablet. And one of the things that I find that I have to do is I'll have to create these temporary layers that go over a particular color that also has that color underneath, like this dark red. I need to put a dark over the top, and then I'll come back in the end and I'll knock that out. And I'll show you how I do that. So I'm going to shade this tongue. But what I need this darker red. And again, I'm always trying to keep in mind how many colors I'm using. So if I have a dark red, I use one dark red, because that's one color that needs to get printed. And then I'll have a second red. So instead of using a random amount of dark reds for shading or dark blues, everything gets shaded with one color shade or one color highlight, just to keep the print count down, because we're trying to save our customer money. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to shade this tongue again, creating the illusion of shape and form using color and shading. And this Stroll is going to have a little bit, and we're just going to get that whole guy in there. We're the tongue, trying to help it look more three-dimensional. We're going to push back this section, and then we'll come back with the highlight and stick it on the other side, and we'll make it look like this has a ridge in it. And of course, we want to always put a nice shadow in like that. I'm just going to fill these little gross nuggets. And yeah, that's basically our shading for the tongue. This is looking very, very Santa Cruz skateboards, isn't it? Not that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing. We all love it. We all love the Santa Cruz skateboard art. So I'm starting to get pretty close to, I'm going to go back real quick and I'm going to, getting close to being, you know, in the ballpark of finished here. I'm going to sample that black again and I'm going to add, some more of these drippy areas down here just to carry some more detail down and off the edge. It's okay to break the border. It actually helps frame the character a little bit better. And so I'm going to go back in with my shading blue and I'm going to add some shadows to this. That's too big of a brush. Thank God for Control Z, which is another reason why I love working digital, is you can undo. If you're painting that in real life, you got to repaint it, which is fine. And it's great and has its place and there's a time for it. And I do still paint analog for sure. Now we got to go back and I get some highlights on these guys to help carry the theme down. All right. Pretty close. So now what I got to figure out is what I'm going to do about this drool. Let's try to make it green. I'm not sure it's going to work. I'm not sure it's going to work. Real quick, going back to this knockout layer, I'm going to select that and I'm going to delete from the red layer below and then sock this darker red layers together and then merge them down. So now I got what I want and I'm not going to forget to do it later. I'm going to go and clean some of this stuff up. Let's try the green. I'm not sure it's going to work, but we're going to give it a try anyway. Let's pick a nice, gross, snotty green and see if we can't convince people that this drool is gross green drool and that this monster, we want to keep white here for our highlights rather than we'll go erase it out. I think that'll be a better approach. We can come in and add these speculars to it. I would probably give this a weighted brush. Nope, don't like it. Don't like how we did that. Let's take a look. Yeah, I'm not convinced. We're gonna go with the different blue. A completely different blue than the blue we have, and hopefully it'll pop enough to do what we want to do. Let's take a look. Because we want our drool to look kinetic, like it's drippy and not totally still. So we got to add some shimmeriness to the jiggly lines like that. We'll come in and add that to our drool like that. And now we have a drooling gross character. I like it. I totally dig it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to wrap up this color section by adding some white highlights to everything, to the areas I want to be really, really glossy and pull them really far forward. So it's just going to be perfect white. And since I have a white base, it's a free color. And so we can just add a little speculars to these areas. A specular is a fancy word for super hot, bright highlight. And I want to kind of get it a little bit in there because we're trying to sell that there's a little ridge right there. So coming in and adding some white specular areas. Like I said, we're trying to pull the center of this lip forward to push the idea that the shape is what we want it to appear to be. And we'll just, This is how it goes. Sit here and do this all day long, and I absolutely love it. There isn't anything I'd rather do than draw monsters all day. I don't get hired to draw monsters all day, but I get hired to draw monsters enough that I can say I get paid to draw monsters. Okay, there's my speculars. I think that I'm gonna call that good. I'm gonna move on now to the background area and all of the additional flavor that I add to all my art to make it look like how I make things look. So I'm going to pause again, and then we're going to come back. Hey everybody, I'm back. Now I'm going to go on to the, like I said, I'm going to go on to the design portion of this, the background area. I have that in its own group as well. So right out of the gate, I have this background area in gray. I think I'm going to make that white. I think I'm going to fill that white. And then I think I'm going to add like a brick to it, like this cool brick. But what I don't want to do is I don't want it to just be black brick. So I'm going to throw this in here. I'm going to resize it to what I want. It's okay to blow it up. Normally I wouldn't blow anything up because you're just going to get a pixelated mess. But in this instance, because we're just doing kind of a showpiece, I can do that. And besides, I'm going to mess with this so much. It's going to be so grungy by the time you're done with it. It won't matter anyway. So there's that. I want to probably do a color fill on that. I think I want to do like a pink color. And then I'll create a layer mask here by alt clicking, and it will just apply to the layer below it. If you didn't know how to do that. And then I can add like, I don't know, multiply. Let's go with overlay. Nope. Screen. So now he's sitting in front of a pink wall. I don't know why he would be doing that, but but he certainly is. I don't know if I want that to be that obnoxious. So probably drop it back a little bit like that. Another thing I'm going to want to do is pull him up off of the background. So we're going to create a drop shadow. We can go back into the color group. We have this this white base layer that we created. We can just make a copy of that. We'll reverse it so it's black. And then if we do a blur on it, let's go filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Let's probably give it like a 30. If you scroll over, you can see how rough your edge is going to be. So let's just do it like a 30 pixel blur. And then if we set this to dissolve, it gets this cool grainy effect. Personally, I like that. I like to give everything as much weird grit as I possibly can because I just think it looks cooler. I'm going to slide that over a little bit to give him a little bit more of it showing. And then we're going to drop the opacity down a little bit on that so that he is. And what we could even do is we could even go with a pink instead of a black, like a dark pink, since it'll be, might have a cool look if we do that. Let's just see how that looks just for fun. So if we select all and hit the move key, which is V on your keyboard, and if you tap up and down on your arrow keys, it will hug whatever is on that layer, so you get a perfect selection. Not everyone knows that trick. I learned it in the video game industry years and years ago. So that's a little bit more subtle drop shadow. It helps him pop. I'll probably come in here and make it even a little bit darker. Maybe saturated a teeny bit, and then we can come back in here and we can mess with the opacity. There. I think that looks pretty good. I think that looks cool. So what we have is I'm going to crop this because I don't like that. Now I can just start adding in whatever I want to. I years and years and years ago, I created this file that you're looking at. I misnamed it. It's supposed to be called Scratchy, but I ended up typoing a T in there. So it's called Scrathy, which actually works for me because I know what file it is really easily. I just took a piece of, I created this myself. And what I did was I took a piece of Scratchboard, and Scratchboard's like a piece of cardstock that has like a black wax coating, and then you can scratch your art out of it. I just took that and like dropped it on the ground and stomped on it and scratched it with a knife and a pen to get this scratched up look. And I have a black and a white layer. So I'm going to grab the white layer first. I'm going to come over to my dude, and that is going to go on the top layer. I have, I'm going to make a new folder called Top Grunge, where I can put any layers of grunginess I'm going to put over the top, because I'm for sure going to do that. I do it to everything. So it's huge. It's a super high res file. So I'm going to just kind of throw it in there, and I will scale it down a little bit. And so we have this like kind of scratched up layer, and I will bring the opacity down on that so it looks a little bit more low key. I also have this half-toned funky grunge that I came across somewhere, and I'm going to lay that over the top because that's going to give it kind of a cool lo-fi old effect. It's black now, but I want it to be white for this top layer, so it's going to go in here. It's going to go right over the top. I like this side's a little bit heavier, so I'm going to rotate it. So now we have this. I just hit Control I, and that will, and then you can see it has this like grain to it. It kind of starts looking like an old beat up comic book or something. So I have the top grunge layer. Now I'm going to add bottom grunge layers to go back to what I was saying earlier about the True Grit texture brushes that I have in the set that I bought. I bought two sets. I bought the Rusty Nib, and then I bought another one that are called copier brushes. And what they are is they basically have like photocopier grain on them. And if you listen to the show, you're going to know that I used to have an old school analog photocopier that I created a lot of my art on. It was a big part of my design style. So there's just things you can do with running a piece of art through a photocopier to give it this natural grit and grain and funkiness to it that you really can't get any other way. And there are now some filters in Photoshop and actions in Photoshop that you can buy from different companies. I'm going to stick to just True Grit for today, but there's another company I use, I'll talk about it on another video, who make a set of actions that recreate the look of a stamp and the look of a copier. And they do a pretty good job. But these True Grit brushes, one of them comes as a 5,000 pixel high res brush, that one set. And there's, I think there's 7 of them here. They're really good. They really do a good job of mimicking like a photocopy texture. So I'm in the background, I'm going to add a couple hits of black grit and grain. I'll just grab a couple different ones and pop them in there. You can see what I'm doing there. And you can, there's a few different ones, so you can get some different splotches. I'm also going to add a layer of white grunge as well, just to help. I mean, any place where you can add funkiness, you're going to be happier for it, I think, in a piece of art like this. And I'll probably actually go and do some in the top grunge layer. I'll do a top white grunge, probably something pretty light like that, just to give it a little bit. And I'll probably bring down the opacity a little bit on that, just so it's not so super obvious, just to help. And then I will come in and I will select John's half of this, and I will delete out anything that is encroaching on his side like that. Keep it clean. I'm going to need to get rid of this side of the white so that John's background on his side comes through. So you are now looking at more or less exactly what I would consider to be finished art for something like, for a project like this. I know the color's a little bit different here than it looked on the Wacom. So I'll go in and I'll punch up the color a little bit. I'll probably grab a saturation layer, and crank up my saturation there a little bit, just to make it look a little bit cooler. I'm not 100% excited about the tongue. So, this is the point where I'll start going in. And one of the nice things about putting everything in groups is you can just turn off that group and you turn off all the layers really quick. Yeah, I think this looks okay. So we'll put that layer back, and we'll put those layers back on. And yeah, that's pretty much how I need to put my name in here. So I'll go in and add my name in there, some typography. I don't know if you guys want to sit through that, but if you do, hang out, hang out, and I'll show you how I do a little typography. Let's just do anyway, whatever. And I actually kind of like that font, to be honest with you. I will. That's weird. There we go. We'll just squeeze that in there. I don't like the spacing on that, so I will go in to the character and I will space this out. We are looking at like 72. Let's call it 90. Yeah, that's better. And I'll leave this black as like a drop shadow. I'll drag a copy out of I'll move it over a little bit, and we're going to give this a hot pink. Again, what I can do is I can go into my BG group. I have this pink. If we change this opacity back up to, I can grab this. I can go in and grab this pink. Going to grab that pink right from it and then just reset my opacity back down to 25. Now what I can do is I can come back up to my text layer and set that color to that hot pink because I like it. And I may add a stroke to it in a little lighter pink. Go into my, not satin, stroke. That's got a black stroke, but we want it to be a pink stroke that's just a little lighter, not quite white. Something probably like that. We'll go back down here to our drop shadow. Wait a minute, what happened? Oh, I have to say okay. And we'll pull our drop shadow back down in here. That kind of dies on the vine, that pink, doesn't it? So let's go with the blue. It kind of dies on the vine too, doesn't it? What if we go with a bluey or blue? There we go. More of a purple. More of a purple, and we will change that stroke to a purple. Stroke to a purple color. A lighter. Something like that. That's not. There we go. And yeah, let's throw, just for fun, let's use a straight font for this. Doing our little branding business here. Let's pick this like a cool little straight font. Let's just go straight up. And we'll just take all these guys and move them up a teeny bit to get them out of the way of that. Let's shrink this guy down a teeny bit. And one thing I'm going to want to probably do here. Yeah, I don't like that. We didn't do the dots right. Easy fix. Yep. And then we have to do the same to this guy. And you guys are probably getting incredibly bored at this point. So close. We're so close, people. Stick with me, please. Don't you give up on me just now. There we go. And last but not least, I would like to add a little bit of texture to this. So I'm going to select this layer. And I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to select, modify, contract. It's going to contract it by, let's call it 8 pixels to start and see where that is. Too many. Select, modify, contract by 4 pixels. That's better. Now I'm going to take one of the brushes that I have that is something that's got like a fuzz on it. We are going to go like that. Then we're going to do the thing that I did before where I set this layer to dissolve so it gets the stippling. And then if I move those layers together, we get this cool effect. And I'm going to call that complete. I will post a final still here at the end so you can get a good look at it. I really appreciate you guys sitting down and listening to me talk about how I work. I did some of these, like I said, a year ago. I did some of these drawing videos and they were very popular. People seem to really like watching artists work, and other artists seem to really like watching artists work. And just to be consistent with myself, I'm going to put this real quick into a folder and call it text. Like I said, somebody else on Earth is probably going to have to look at this at some point, and I'd like it to be as nice and professional as possible. I didn't get into the color separations. Like I said, I think you guys have sat here and listened long enough. I'll probably do another video at some point that shows how I do my separations. If you want to see that, comment down below and let me know if that's something that you want me to spend some time on. And other than that, you know, if you like what you saw, you can subscribe to the channel. I have a regular podcast that is at anchor.fm, Anyway Whatever Podcast. There's an Instagram. All the social media is at Anyway Whatever Podcast. Twitter, AWP_podcast. And of course, this YouTube channel. If you liked watching this and you think other people would think it was interesting too, go ahead and share it. And as always, please comment. Let me know what you think. And yeah, anyway, whatever.